New Year's Day, 1961, dawned with a sky the color of gold. The sun seemed to rise with purpose that morning, its light spilling over Greenhill as if it knew that something great was coming. Jacob Augustus stood at the edge of his garden, staring out at the hills beyond. His hands rested on the wooden fence, his thoughts wandering to the future. Jamaica was changing, and so was his life. Inside the house, Grace was humming softly as she prepared their breakfast. The past couple months had been a turning point for the both of them. She had healed, at least physically, and though she still carried the scars of her past, she had found something close to peace in this place. Their bond had grown, much like the crops in their garden, nurtured by patience and time. Jacob, she called from inside the house, come for your breakfast before it get cold. He smiled to himself, turning to go inside. The smell of fried dumplings and ackee greeted him at the door, and for a moment, he marveled at how much his life had changed in a short period of time. A year ago, he had no concept of grace, a stranger, a wounded soul he found by the side of the road. Now, she was his partner in every sense of the word. As they ate, Grace spoke about the changes happening in Jamaica. The island was abuzz with the prospect of independence, and there was talk in town of the new constitution being drafted. The British flag still flew, but not for much longer. You think independence going to change things for we? She asked, her voice curious but cautious. Jacob chewed thoughtfully, then shrugged. Maybe, maybe not right away though, but it give people hope, and that alone is very powerful. Grace nodded, her eyes distant as she considered his words. Hope, she echoed softly. That's what we need, more hope. Later that day, they traveled to Brownstown. The market town had grown busier in recent months. The streets were alive with the sound of vendors calling out their wares, the smells of jerk chicken and roasted corn filling the air. Jacob had some business to attend to. New orders for furniture had been coming in steadily, and he was starting to make a name for himself as a reliable carpenter. While Jacob negotiated with a local shopkeeper about a new order for mahogany chairs, Grace wandered through the market. Her mind was restless. The talk of independence had stirred something in her. It wasn't just the country that was on the brink of a new beginning. She wanted a new beginning for herself also. She was ready for more, for something permanent. Jacob had saved her life, and in return, she ensured that she did everything possible for him. But she wanted to offer more. She wanted to truly belong to him. When Jacob concluded his business, they made their way back up the Dry Harbor Mountains towards home. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the dusty road. They walked in comfortable silence until Grace finally spoke. Jacob, she began, her voice soft but resolute. I was wondering if you ever think about getting married. Jacob stopped walking and turned to look at her, his face serious but his eyes warm, engaging. The thought had crossed his mind many times, but he hadn't known how to bring it up. Grace had already been through a lot, and he didn't want her to feel rushed into anything. You're sure you're ready for that? He asked, searching her face. She smiled, a small, shy smile that lit up her eyes. You take me up from the roadside and give me a brand new life. What I feel for you is not just gratitude, Jacob. I love you, and I want to build a life with you. Jacob felt a warmth in his chest, a feeling that had to be more than love. It was deep, unshakable, an indelible bond. He took her hand and held it tight. I love you too, Grace, he said simply. Let's do it. Let's get married. The months that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. The meeting house in Green Hill was small but beautiful, its whitewashed walls standing tall against the backdrop of the lush green hills. The community came together to help, and neighbors offered what they could. Some gave food, others helped decorate the church. It felt like a celebration, not just of their union, but of hope and new beginnings for everyone. On a bright day in April 1961, under a sky as blue as the Caribbean Sea, Jacob and Grace were married. The ceremony was simply beautiful, and the entire community turned out to celebrate with them. As they stood before the pastor, Jacob couldn't help but think of the journey that had brought them to this moment. Grace, standing beside him in a beautiful dress, was no longer the fragile woman he had found on the side of the road. She was strong, confident, and full of life. After the ceremony, they returned to their little home, now not just a shelter, but a home. The sounds of laughter and music filled the air as their neighbors joined in the celebration. The smell of jerk pork, roasted yam, and breadfruit mixed with the scent of fresh flowers that adorned the tables. Jacob couldn't remember the last time he had felt such happiness, and as he looked around at the people gathered in the yard, he knew that this was the start of something greater than he had ever imagined. As the evening wore on and the guests began to leave, Jacob and Grace sat together under the stars. The night was quiet now, save for the distant chirping of crickets and the occasional rustle of the wind in the trees. This is the official start of our life now, Grace said softly, resting her head on Jacob's shoulder. Together, we can build anything. You're right, Jacob replied, squeezing her hand. We can do anything once we're together. Jamaica was still on the cusp of its own new beginning. The winds of change were blowing across the island, and though there were challenges ahead, there was also hope. Independence was less than a year away, and the promise of freedom hung in the air like the scent of freshly picked pimento on a hot day. Jacob and Grace were ready. They had built a beautiful beginning, and now, together, they would build their future.